Hi, everybody. My name is Kurt Franklin. I manage all the webinars and events here at Fulcrum. I want to say thanks for joining us today for this webinar. It's going to be awesome. We've got Jake Freivald, our VP of Product Marketing, here to present about environmental field operations. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. I did just want to do a couple of housekeeping notes. Throughout the presentation, if you think of a question or if a comment, even something you might want Jake to touch on at the end of the presentation, feel free to drop it in the question box. We've allotted some time at the end for questions. We'll get to as many of them as we can. If we don't get to yours, we will follow up with you on it. Trust me on that. We've also got a couple of materials you can download and check out that are relevant to the topic today. One of them is an IDC case study that was done on Fulcrum, and the other is a Dilux case study as well that's relevant to the material that Jake's going to present. So yeah, please just ask questions, check out the material, and listen to Jake. So with that, yeah, take it away, Jake.
Thanks very much, Kurt, and thanks everybody for being here. We are talking today about digitizing environmental field operations, and we're specifically focused on how to increase efficiency and simplify compliance. So in order to do that, I always like to start these things with a goal. My goal here is to refocus our field processes on the field. That sounds kind of stupid, but you'll see why I mean that in a couple of minutes. As I said, to gain better efficiency and compliance. To do that, we've got a bunch of little steps to go through. We're going to talk about a mismatch and the side hustle that we frequently see and the cause of these things and the effects of the cause. Anyway, the agenda is kind of fun. It's a lot of little ideas that all kind of compile together into the notion of digitizing, using a platform, and why that's important. Naturally, this is something Fulcrum does, so I'll tell you a little bit about Fulcrum at the end, but by that time you'll understand where we're coming from as an organization, why we do what we do, how we support our customers the way we support them. So with all that in mind, let's get started. And I said I'd begin with a mismatch in field operations, specifically environmental field operations, but it's true across the board. The specific environmental issue is that we need to capture data in these environmental workflows, and ideally that data would be digitized so it's easy to share, easy to understand, easy to do computations with and analysis with and so on. Ideally it would be automated so that we're able to get the information we need exactly when we need it, and it should be standardized so that we can compare how we did in one area with another and how we did with one process in another and so on and so forth. So those are the data capture requirements for our environmental workflows. And the reason for that is we need the data coming out of it to be highly defensible, right? We're creating a record of what's going on environmentally. So it needs to be highly defensible, potentially even in a court. We need it to be geospatially accurate. If you're talking about an environment, it better be an environment about a place. The data itself could be simple or complex, and we see workflows of both types with our customers. That's totally fine, and it needs to be very timely. So we're going to focus on these kinds of four requirements for data capture and environmental workflows. On the other hand, what we often see, our customers tell us about it, people come to us and say, here's the problem we want to solve, et cetera, is that the data capture techniques used by environmental field teams are frequently not ideal for these kinds of these kinds of environmental workflows. They're using spreadsheets if they're lucky. They're often using paper. The work that they're doing is highly manual and it tends to be a bit ad hoc. So instead of the highly defensible kinds of data that you want to collect with environmental workflows, they focus in the field on being highly flexible because things change in the field in the moment sometimes, and they need to be able to compensate for that. And you know what? A lot of digitizing processes don't do that for them. And what does is paper. So they live with paper, even though it has so many disadvantages. The precise geolocation might be difficult to pin down. Literally, in the case of a map where you're putting a pin into it or marking it with a pen or something like that, or reading off the lat long of a particular location. But it also means that even if you do have a GPS that can capture that information, connecting that GPS location to where you are can be complicated. Maybe it's just a lot of digits to write down, and you get, it's just a pain in the neck to do. Or maybe, as happened in one case that I've talked about before on webinars like this, you have a situation where you're capturing that information in a spreadsheet, and in this case, the spreadsheet had a typo in it where they flipped the latitude and the longitude. This particular company served they didn't serve the insurance companies, but companies that were looking for insurance coverage would use the outputs of these surveys, and an insurance company definitely loses confidence in the report when one of the buildings that you're looking at is actually out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Again, the data can be simple or complex, and paper and spreadsheets are good for capturing different kinds of simple or complex data. So that is one aspect of it that's not a big deal. But you do see very high latency, right? Even if you're capturing things in a spreadsheet, you're seeing that it takes a bit of time for that spreadsheet data to be then uploaded into a document, into a system. And in fact, I have a friend who talked to me about how he was working down in the hollers of Kentucky, and had no connectivity. So at the time, this was prior to using Fulcrum, he was using waterproof paper and capturing that information initially on that waterproof paper, then going back to the hotel at night and transcribing that onto a clean copy of normal paper, and then transcribing that onto a spreadsheet because it needed to be uploaded into systems. So that level of latency is really significant and, in fact, somewhat demoralizing. Which leads me to my next point, and that is that very often the field work isn't done out in the field. And what I just described with my friend in the hollers of Kentucky, that situation was driven by the fact that he didn't have the right way to capture that information. It led to what I like to call a second shift of admin work that needs to be done after the initial field work is done. And that second shift where you go to a hotel room and type it in, or go back to the office and type it in, that leads to a great deal of inefficiency, obviously, because those people are doing work that shouldn't be done by them again. The specific type of person who is doing that work is typically highly trained, and you're wasting their talents on doing clerical work instead. The types of errors that you get can be pretty broad. They might be typographic. In other words, they just like type in long wrong or whatever it might be. But they also might misremember something. If they've been out all day and they're tired, and they come back and they're copying stuff over from one site, and they misremember, this situation happened at site A, not site B, and they misremember that, you can get actual substantive errors just because they don't remember properly what was going on in those sites. So that's another type of issue that comes up very often. And again, that high data latency, I can't emphasize that enough. You're talking about, we've talked to customers who have had scenarios where it's taken them literally weeks, sometimes even months, to get full reporting done on a particular site or a particular building project or scenario or whatever it might be. When it, ideally, the data is collected that day, you have all the data. Ideally, that data would be put into a report right then, and that kind of data latency is just unacceptable in their business scenarios. So those are some examples of where we see issues coming out of that second shift. And frankly, the data problems are only one part of it. The operational problems of the process not going as effectively as they should, and personal burnout. Engineers doing clerical work, they don't want to do that. They know what their time is good for, and that's not it. So that fieldwork side hustle is something we want to avoid, and that is as important of a part of what we'd like to accomplish by digitizing this kind of environmental data collection, as would be the data issues themselves. So there is a cause that we can identify for these kinds of issues, and they happen even when we're trying to digitize these processes. So this is an example of why we frequently fail to digitize effectively. If you like the phrase digital transformation, you can think about lack of success in digital transformation. If you think that's a buzzword and hate it, that's fine too. I'm a marketing guy who hates marketing speak, so I'm good with that. But the point is that this is the problem with trying to digitize. And that is that when you've got a field process that has, let's say, one particular step in it, it involves usually more than one thing that needs to occur. You need to get information from the GIS application in order to understand where you are and what your site conditions are and so on. You might need to get information from your enterprise asset management system to know about which specific assets you're looking at or which assets you're using to look at it or whatever, if you're inspecting, say, pumps or something like that. And an ERP system, let's say, just as an example, might involve costing and other sorts of things that you might be concerned about. All of that information needs to be brought together in the hands of the field worker. And each of these different systems has a mobile app that they use in order to build out their processes. But those mobile apps, even though they're mobile, aren't really built for the field workers themselves, not built with the field worker mentality in mind. The EAM field application is built with the mentality of the person who manages the EAM system. So it's focused on the things that that person is focused on. And that's rarely the same exact thing that the field worker is focused on. It's one part of what the field worker is focused on, but it's not the whole picture that the field worker is focused on. And because the field worker mentality isn't integrated into these applications, two major issues happen. One is that you have to use multiple different systems or different multiple field apps in order to capture all of the information that you need, or even perform the process in general that you need to perform. And the second is that often not everything is there. Like since the entire picture isn't there and it's not flexible enough and so on, it's frequently the field worker who is using pen and paper, because that is more flexible, to capture some part of that process. The pen and paper might be as simple as saying on a clipboard, you've got a checklist that says, first, go to the ERP app and do this. Second, go to the EAM app and do that. Third, go to the GIS system and do that. It could be that simple, but it's still paper involved in a process that becomes digital, or that we want to become digital. So that's just step one. And of course, each of these steps has similar kinds of issues. So what we see is a very complex environment that's siloed in ways that don't benefit the field. Each organization, each part of the business that has its own process to own has a platform to do its work in, a platform to communicate with, a platform to standardize, customize, and integrate with other systems. That's something the field doesn't have, so they deal with this instead. So that's the technological cause of what we're facing. And if we consider how that plays out in practical applications, I'll talk about three here. We can see why that kind of fragmented approach is hindering us. So for example, if you look at a contaminated site assessment where you're doing soil sampling along a pre-planned grid, you may be using a number of different techniques, including surface and subsurface probing, using a trowel or an auger or DPT or whatever. You might be collecting a lot of different kinds of information, whether it's VOCs or lead or what have you. The issue here is that you want, for that workflow, something that is structured and repeatable, something that the field's always going to be able to manage in the same way every time. And that will allow you to ensure that everything is correctly sequenced and nothing skipped within that entire process. But while we do want it to be the correct sequencing and nothing skipped and very structured and repeatable, we also want to be able to adapt if we need to, right? So the field workflow needs to be managed as a single process that we execute the same way every time, but we also need the adaptability to do things. For example, here, if you've got, a drum, or you see soil that seems to be stained by petroleum or something, and that wasn't on the original map, and you need now to document it specially, or you need to take special care with it, well, you need to be able to adapt to that in the moment and figure out how to manage that. So what we're looking for with field workflow management is some kind of dynamic and spatially accurate workflow. That's going to be more challenging if each of the various elements that you're dealing with is located in some other system that isn't controlled by the field. Let's take another example, in this case, water sampling. If you're just sampling monitoring wells, you're trying to create a digital chain of custody, right? In order to say, here is the sample that I've got, and I've got a legal document that shows exactly what I saw in that well, and here's the process by which that data was captured and modified, and who owned it, and who made any changes to it, and so on. Well, as you create this digital chain of custody, you're going to need to make sure that you're fully auditable from the well all the way to the lab, and know if changes were made. Where were they standing when they made it? Who was doing it? Why were they doing it? That is really, really difficult to do in that fragmented environment I talked about before. You're getting information from the GIS. Well, okay, what information did you capture at that time via the GIS data? If you've got the enterprise asset management system talking to you about the specifics of, say, the pump you're using in the well to raise water from it, or whatever you may be doing, all of these things come into play. And there's no one place you can go to say, this person followed this process to this end, and all of the data was captured exactly as was required. So if you want high fidelity, legally defensible data, you're going to need to look very closely at field data collection in a rigorous single process kind of way. and that fragmentation simply doesn't help. And then with the last example, if you're doing, say, an environmental site, site assessment, and the goal is simply to update the GIS with better information, right? That may be your complete goal. And very often you might look at that and say, well, then I need to use my GIS tools to do that. But if you have the need for an engineer to be out there, somebody who has more specific detail about, or who has better understanding about, things like spill locations and how to handle, above ground or underground storage tanks, things of that nature. Well, having that engineer be able to capture highly accurate GIS data is also really important. Now, I think it's really important to note here that GIS tools for GIS personnel are not going away. The requirement for GIS people to have those really robust capabilities where you can do almost anything is really important. But that doesn't change the fact that you can get really robust, highly accurate line, polygon, point GIS data from people who are not GIS experts and still have that pushed back to the GIS. Now, do you want data coming from a GIS person, from a non-GIS expert to directly update, say, your ArcGIS implementation? That's up to you to decide what kind of QA goes into that. But having the ability to at least get that information from more people will completely amplify your ability to get better GIS data. The only question then, of course, is how you're going to manage accommodating that inside your other processes. So if this is the complex and siloed environment that we find ourselves in, and we need to fix it so that we can instead standardize and customize and integrate our processes in the field, then we need a platform of our own to do that. Standardizing, customizing, and integrating is just what platforms do. So we want to have a platform that will do that for the field. The field needs to own a platform. If you do get the field to own its own platform, then every one of these individual steps can have elements in it that will include EAM data, GIS data, safety checks, right? Something that often gets short shrift in these kinds of environments is you need to have the safety requirements locked right in step into what you're trying to accomplish. Well, you should digitize that part of the process too, so you have an auditable trail that says, yes, when they were inspecting this pump, they took the appropriate safety steps to do that too. Each one of the steps then becomes the purview of the field platform, and the integration with the other outside entities is what the field platform is designed to do, to help you manage that aspect of what has to happen. And I'd like to drill down on that a little bit. I think it's helpful to take it from the abstraction that I just gave you in this very simple block diagram into something that's still a little abstract, but a little bit more concrete. And I'll do that by talking about a day in the life of your field data. And I've broken down the slide here into three elements. The middle one is the field system of record, that field platform. And I'm putting Fulcrum there because this is what Fulcrum does, but this is generically true. If you say, you know what, I don't want to be a Fulcrum customer, but I need to go out and do better field work, I'm still going to say that you need a field platform. So your field platform, above that is your field tech systems. These are the systems that are owned by and for the field teams themselves, right? So it's not some other entity that takes care of these. IT is there to support and manage, but it's not your enterprise asset management team that's managing these systems. It's you. Enterprise systems are those things that the enterprise asset management team and GIS team and all those other teams do manage, right? So those are your three layers or three types of technology. Before your field worker goes out into the field, there's going to be some activity that needs to take place to get them ready, right? So you might get 3D camera imagery from a prior inspection from the 3D camera system, right? That's typically something that your field teams are going to own. Drone information might come in as well. Do I have imagery from the drones that I can pre-populate? Do I have information about what areas were scanned previously or why? Maybe you're doing some analysis on drone data. You're getting LiDAR data. You're doing some AI analysis on it to see where your hotspots of various types might be. That information will be downloaded. At the same time, you're assembling information from your GIS, like we talked about before, your asset management system, and maybe field service management or other kinds of tasking information. So all of that comes together prior to you even stepping out of the gate to provide the information to the field worker. As the field worker is physically out there in the field doing their job, there may be things that need to happen. Now, these require typically some kind of connectivity, but there may be things that can happen that will enable them to be much more effective and or precise in what they're trying to accomplish. So sensor data, you got a pipe. The pipe has on it some kind of sensor that says what the pressure should be. And you can confirm the pipe sensor data and the gauge on the outside and confirm that those two things are the same. Maybe you're doing something along those lines. Web services of various types are one of the ones that I think are most important for people. And the simplest use case here is just weather. If you go out and say, I need to have I need to know what the temperature and humidity were like in that area on that day. It's much better to have that come from a nearby weather station or from the National Weather Service rather than have your engineer kind of say, okay, well, weather.com, I just looked it up, says it's this time and or this temperature, and it kind of looks kind of cloudy today. So, you want to have that coverage and that data to be precise. So you get that precision from calling a web service. GNS receivers, that's something that Fulcrum supports in part. And if you need there are many use cases where we can support a GNS receiver in order to get you the right kind of data that you need. And then there are other situations where we want to push information out from Fulcrum, from that platform, whatever platform you're using. We want to send alerts. We see an immediate problem. Got to send an alert out now. Maybe I'm seeing a significant fire hazard. Calling out to a GIS to be able to say, what's the closest point to a certain zone in this area? I need to be able to go and see what that point is on this line. So, send me that information. Making those kinds of calls out and callbacks means that you're going to get the kind of data that you need from external systems, as well as with the alerts, pushing information out to those external systems. So that's out in the field. Stuff is actually happening in the field. And like I said, that often requires connectivity, generally does. But if you have that capability, if you're in a place where you have connectivity, it can make a big difference. And then finally, post-activity, there's going to be a ton of information that you've collected. And all of that information needs to go back to the various kinds of systems we talked about, whether they be GIS or asset management. If you got your tasking from field service management applications, it needs to update that, and so on and so forth. This is kind of what we talked about in the prior slide, so I think this is pretty straightforward. But basically, I did the job, share the data as widely and as well as you can. So with all of those kinds of things in mind, the platform for the field is the thing that has to manage these things occurring. And one of the reasons I think that the field platform is so important is that if you don't have a field platform, then the fragmentation we've talked about will overwhelm any attempt to do this. So if that's true, then a field platform helps in a couple of specific ways. One, it helps promote that field process ownership. Instead of parceling out processes to the EAM team and the GIS team and so on, the field team gets to say, here is the way I perform this function. You can do things as obvious as here's where I go get the truck, and you can have that as part of your checklist. Here are my safety checks. Here's the specific asset inspection that I do. Here is the environmental inspection that I do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things are owned by the field instead of being owned by other parts of the company as well. It's going to, and partly because it does that, partly because it pushes the ownership to the people who are most directly involved in doing the work, it's going to simplify the workflow management. The workflow becomes very logical. The procedures make sense. The necessity to capture pieces of information flows nicely from one piece of the information to the next. So that simplification of workflow management is very strong in this case. The data that you capture in that workflow is all kept in one place. Whether it's information that you pulled at that time from the GIS or the asset management system, or whether it's stuff that's immediately captured by the person who's out there in the field, you have a state of business. This is what things were like in the field, and it's all in one place. Again, massively helping with that audit trail, legal defensibility, and so on. And then finally, I think this is really crucial, it provides the focus for field communication. And what I mean by that is that if you have again, the business owner of asset management, then everybody comes to the asset management platform to get asset management information. And that enables them, the organization, to really have a focus on, okay, well, the way I do asset management information is this. I go out and I get it this way. If you have a lot of different ways of creating field data, then there will be a lot of different processes to go and get that data. Sometimes it'll be to go email Jane to get the spreadsheet. Sometimes it'll be I'm going to go to that system to pull information out of it. Sometimes it'll be I've got to talk to the GIS guys to get information from them. So providing a focus for field communication where people say, okay, I go to if I go to the field platform, that's going to be much more manageable and helpful for communication than if you try to do this in a fragmented way. So looking at specifically, you're eliminating double data entry, you're automating reporting because the data is all in one place and that can be easily done. The compliance requirements that you have are being managed by the field and you're assured of getting those compliance requirements done. The location-rich data is all there, not just from the GIS pros, but from everybody who's involved. The audit trail is established and maintained. And finally, for things like if you're focused on ISO 14001, the various goals that you have for those can easily be focused in one place instead of in that fragmented technical environment. So with all that in mind, I'd like you to consider one more thing. And this is forward-looking, but I think it's important, because a lot of people are talking about how AI is going to help. And if you are like me, there's plenty of reason in your mind for skepticism of this. We've seen all this before, right? With everything from SaaS to blockchain to whatever. And some of those things have turned out to be, major shifts in the way we work, although it rarely happened as fast as people hyped it up to. And some of them have never really come to fruition. Like blockchain is not integrated into systems the way people thought it would be when it first came out. So we got to think now about how we're going to incorporate AI into the future field work, but in a realistic way. And the fragmentation that we've been talking about, I think, is critically important for understanding what that's going to look like. Here are systems that we've got, safety management and whatever. Here are the systems that we've got to manage our processes. But we all know that even with these systems and platforms, there's actually a lot of other stuff behind the scenes, because we were just talking to a customer the other day where they said, yeah, I have an EAM for everything except water. In water, I've got this other EAM, which another company that we acquired has, and it's better, so we're keeping it. And that doesn't even start to consider the fact that you've got data marts and data warehouses, you've got and data lakes, you've got Tommy's spreadsheet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of stuff back there that is needed to manage your business day to day. Regardless of whether you like it this way or not, you're using it to manage your business day to day. And now you have to ask the question, which AI am I going to use in the field? Because if it's related to all of these different individual pockets of AI, then it's going to be incredibly hard to say, I'm going to be able to use AI in the field in such and such a way. That is not saying that the AI in these platforms isn't beneficial. I guarantee you, I've seen them working on it. Esri is doing GeoAI right now. It's going to be very effective for quite a number of things. But if the platform that you're using is not the source of all the data, if the AI can't look at the entire process that the field is doing at one time, if that's not all within the scope of the AI that you're working with, it's going to be very hard to apply AI to field work in the future. So the platform, I think, is also incredibly important for incorporating AI into the future of field work. So with all that, we spent about a half hour talking about what we need to do, why a platform is step one in digitizing these kinds of workflows. I'm going to just talk for a second about Fulcrum, then I'm going to go into the various kinds of questions that you might have. I hope that there's some out there for us. And I'll start by saying that, I talked about a field platform because it's important, and Fulcrum sells a field platform. Yes, this is a vendor talking about what a vendor does. But I do that not because I'm being self-serving here. It's the other way around. Our customers have told us what they need, and what they need is this kind of field platform that drives all of the field work for them, that sits at the heart of what field work does and integrates with all of these other kinds of corporate systems. Um, there are a number of different ways we could talk about what we do specifically and how we focus our efforts, but I'll break it down this way. We focus greatly on field data collection and specifically on how we make it easy to use for the field itself, for the field worker, for the person who's walking out with safety boots and a hard hat on, and making it so that that person can easily use the application that we've got. I hear over and over again from customers, I've got some retirees who have come back on as contractors and they need to support those people. It needs to be really straightforward for them not to fall back into paper. And Fulcrum, I mean, we're really proud of what we've done there to make it really easy for those people. It's not just enough to have it be for the folks out in the field as well, though we really need the people who are supporting and maintaining those processes to have really a really easy time, relatively speaking, of doing that too. I think it's worth pointing out, by the way, that the beauty of having this kind of a platform and the beauty I see in Fulcrum is not that all of the complexity is gone. The complexity is still there. The integration with the different systems is still there. The managing of the processes is still there. But we simplify a great deal of it and we hide complexity from the field teams. We make it so that they don't have to work as hard to get what they need. It's a little bit like when the iPod first came out, right? For those of you old enough to remember, it wasn't that we had never had music devices before. We'd never had one that was so simple that anybody could use it before. We want to do that for both the field and really simplify a great deal for the support staff and make it possible for them to do the things that they need to without necessarily getting the heavy guns from IT involved in doing it. They can manage most of these processes by themselves. All right, that's one. Field data collection. Field workflow management is another one. Having the field manage its own processes, being able to send SMSs from the field, being able to say you're going to do this and then you're going to do that and then you're going to do the other thing, etc. All of that I think is really important, whether you're from a technical aspect looking at conditional visibility and things like that, or whether you're just looking at, making sure that I can make changes in the field. We love the fact that you can have, and I've had customers tell me this too, you can have somebody out in the field say, hey, that process we built, we didn't account for this anomaly. Jenny, can you fix it for me? Jenny changes the workflow inside Fulcrum. She hits save on the what we call the app builder. She hits save. The person out in the field hits sync, and bang, that is now accounted for. That anomaly is now accounted for, and they can go on with their day. That kind of workflow management is phenomenally valuable to our customers. Field data integration. I've talked about this quite a bit. Both directions, empowering teams with data and sharing that field data out effectively. And then finally, really driving innovation around the field and focusing specifically not just on AI like a lot of people are doing right now. I mentioned earlier that I'm a marketer who kind of hates marketing buzzwords and stuff. I feel like there's a lot of people who are saying, oh, we've got an AI-powered toaster now. I really don't care about your AI-powered toaster. And I don't care about when I'm standing in front of, not me, but when someone is standing in front of a pad-mounted transformer, or they're standing on a weir or looking at a pipe, they don't care that AI can summarize their emails. It's just not interesting to them. So by really focusing on practical capabilities to help the field, we're making a big difference in the lives of those field workers. You may have seen some announcements about specific capabilities we have. One of them is called audio fast fill, for example. Literally, you've got a form that you're filling out, a workflow that you're working through, and you can hit the record button, set the phone next to you, and talk through the process you're working on while you're working with both hands. Or you can do it, it's cold outside, you want to keep your gloves on as long as possible. You hit record on Fulcrum and talk to it about what you want. It'll take the pieces of what you've done and it'll break them up into the field. It's not like speech to text where it just fills out a comments form, a field. It will take the data that you've got and say, oh, well, this piece goes along with that checkbox, and this piece means that I should select this part of the dropdown, and this piece means I should add some text to this field here in the comments. So by providing that kind of practical, focused AI capabilities to field workers, we are going to continue to make their lives better. And again, I'm focusing on the field worker. It actually is true for support staff too. Ask me about Fulcrum insights and stuff like that if you want to. So those are things that I'm really excited about with Fulcrum and focused on with Fulcrum. If you want to learn more about Fulcrum's AI vision, there's a video that I encourage you to go watch. That's it's a screen capture from it on the right-hand side. Kurt is going to send that out in the chat right now. Another thing that you can look at that is useful, in my opinion, is this analyst brief by Lynn Schneider, which talks about the platform issue specifically. This might be good as a justification if you're trying to justify this to higher ups, get funding, that sort of thing. It's not about Fulcrum. Like, we did sponsor it, but it's not about Fulcrum. It's based on Lynn's prior research at IDC. She's a longtime IDC analyst. She focuses on GIS and data collaboration and that sort of thing. And she wrote this multi-page document talking about what her research showed her, and a lot of the points in it align very directly with what we've talked about today. So it's a good document to kind of get the outside perspective. Say, Jake, you're drinking your own Kool-Aid. That's fine. Talk to Lynn. See what she's got to say. So I recommend you taking a look at both of those as well. Additionally, I think there is a PDF document with a case study from our customer Deluxe that has used Fulcrum for environmental specific use cases. With that, I'd be happy to talk to you about what you're seeing, experience where you are in your journey, answer any questions you've got. Just to set up that conversation, on the screen here, you see a ton of different customers who have come to us from every different situation. People who are on pen and paper in your lower right, who are starting at the very barest of bones for their technological journey, all the way up through people who are already started with a platform. They had a specific platform they were using for field work and decided, you know what, this isn't really focused where I need to be focused, or I'm seeing challenges I don't want to face here. So let's see if Fulcrum can do a better job. We're proud of every one of these customers, and would be happy to bring you along for that ride as well. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor for questions. And I think I should, if I do this right, I won't lose my slide here, and I will see some. All right. Yep. And I'm sorry, I'm a little new to the new update to go to webinars interface, so that's why it's a little slow here. I have Caitlin asking me a question, a couple of questions actually in one. Is there a chance to change the export feature regarding photos? And this is pretty specific. So Caitlin, I hate to say this, but I'm going to defer that question off to product and sales experts who can answer that for you. The second one is, what are the chances of being able to export polygons or sample points to Google Earth? You're beyond my technical knowledge there, because I don't know what Google Earth specifically uses. So we will have to answer both of those questions offline in a separate feedback to you. Thank you very much. Another question is it's very short. It says, what about Maximo work orders? There's not a lot of context to that, so let me back up the truck a little bit. I assume what you're saying is you got a Maximo work order and you need to incorporate Fulcrum into the process of fulfilling that Maximo work order. If that's not correct, come back to me. The short answer is that Maximo implementations tend to be a little bit different one from the other. So you will see some specific integration requirements there where we say, okay, when Maximo executes, creates a work order, that basically triggers an action within Fulcrum. And there are a couple of different ways that can be triggered. But just consider it, an API call. We've got a listener listening for it, and the API gets called, and we will then instantiate. Usually, the way I've heard about it being done here is we will instantiate a record in a Fulcrum app that was designed to somewhat mimic that work order. And then follow-on processes from that work order are going to be managed through other Fulcrum apps with the appropriate integration points back to Fulcrum. So when step one happens within an app, it will push information back to Maximo and so on. So yes, we can integrate with Maximo work orders. I'm hoping that's what you were asking. And to get into real detail about how it works, we'd want to talk about what your specific requirements are, how your work orders are set up, and so on and so forth. Hope that answered your question. The next question says, I heard about your dictation feature. I'm assuming you're talking audio fast fill here, but it wasn't working for me without cell signal. So it sounds like you didn't just hear about it, you also were trying it out in the field. Do you have plans for making that work offline? That's a brilliant question because it shows the necessity to adapt to changing technology within the market. It's not just about Fulcrum here, it's about what's out there in the market. And one of the things that's really hard if you don't have a platform is trying to piecemeal together all of these different solutions and have your AI expert work with this piece and the AI expert work with that piece. Bottom line is, yes, we do have plans, but right now, what we've found is those. Let me back up. The way that audio fast fill works is it works with your phone AI to do the transcription of the text that you're saying, and then has a special process and some specialized prompting to work with an AI to figure out how what you said, that transcript, integrates with or maps to the fields in your Fulcrum app. So, so that right now is an online process that uses an LLM. And what we found is that the LLM, or what they're now starting to call SLMs or what have you, the on-device equivalents of the LLM that we use are not yet powerful enough to execute that on-device. So do we have plans to make that work? Yes. Those plans will definitely require other advances within the industry at large, and not just be something within Fulcrum. So your question really highlights how much we're working at kind of the cutting edge of technology to make sure that the best solution we have that works is out there for the field. I hope that was a reasonable explanation and you understand it and all that stuff. If I said something that wasn't clear, please let me know. But yeah, we plan to do it without cell signal, but that is going to have dependencies on when the technology catches up to the vision. I just got a comment from Todd. Thank you. You can download, export from Fulcrum data to Google Earth and Esri shapefiles. So I don't know what Google Earth uses, but definitely to Esri shapefiles. There are a lot of different export formats, KML, GeoJSON, etc. We just added geodatabase, by the way. So if you weren't using that before because we didn't have it, that's just been added. So thank you, Todd. I don't have the technical details. I don't understand enough, but there's a bunch of different formats, and hopefully one of those will serve the need. Jorge mentions the app can operate if it loses signal that is offline. Yes, thank you. That's a great comment, and I appreciate it. Paul asks, what is the recommended approach to building the platform with the data from the various systems? The platform is the thing. To be clear, to clarify my commentary, my terminology. The platform is the thing where the actions take place that the field manages and executes. That's the field platform. So the platform is less something you create and more something that you buy. Now, people would create their own platforms sometimes. I've seen people create what they consider a platform in SharePoint. I would never recommend that. They were very proud of it, so I won't disparage it, but it was brittle. It's not like, but the point there was to use SharePoint as the platform to say, okay, well, when data comes in from this part of the system, it's going to go into this application, and then we're going to use a custom-built app to, SharePoint app to use in the field and so on. Like, so, but there's always something. There's that central hub, and so the platform itself being the place where all of the data and processes are managed by the field, it simply needs to be something that works for the field. So you could do this in other platforms. You could try to build this out in a generic integration platform, let's say. You could try to build it out in something like Microsoft Power Automate. People have tried building out things like this in Microsoft Power Apps using Power Automate as kind of the integration component. I'm not saying that that's not doable. What I'm saying, what I would suggest though, is that you look at how the platform that you're considering supports the field. The specific problem I saw with Power Automate Power Apps, and this is not disparaging Power Apps, okay? This is not disparaging Power Apps. It's very good at what it does. But the reason that field teams struggled with it, first, was that it was really built for IT teams to do low-code programming. It was not built for non-technical teams to do low-code programming. It was built for people who understood all the various elements that go into, the I don't know if they term it this way, but model view controller kind of style of creating an application. And that is complicated for someone whose job is really to manage a field team or to manage a set of field teams. It's just hard to do. It's harder to find those skills to manage it. Whereas Fulcrum is designed to make it easy. I could talk about the history of Fulcrum and why we did it this way, but we were designed from the ground up to make it so that people who weren't programmers would still be able to do 80 to 100% of what they needed to do. And we see that over and over and over again. If you need help, we're there. We've got, consulting to do jobs, but most of the stuff, if you've been onboarded correctly, can probably be done by you with either no help or kind of off the shelf capabilities, skill sets that you can get anywhere. That was one of the reasons, is that Power Apps is built in a different way to support a different kind of problem than Fulcrum supports. The other one was the way it handled GIS. You could kind of geotag photos and stuff like that, but it was very complicated to do anything really GIS oriented. Even though Microsoft and Esri are partners, doing that integration with Esri and trying to get anything like that to work, it's just extremely complicated. Whereas Fulcrum, it's built in, it's assumed that you want geospatial data, it's assumed that you're going to capture data on every point that you work at unless you tell us otherwise. It's assumed that you're going to want your audit trail to include geospatial data. Like, all that stuff is just there out of the box because we know that that's what we need. So I guess the recommended approach is start from what the field needs. Start with the field mindset. That's what Fulcrum does from the ground up. That's our reason for being. That's literally why we exist. And then create the platform or buy the platform that most suits those specific sets of needs. Don't get lost if you're doing an RFP or something like that. Don't get lost in the technical weeds that won't really affect the field teams. Obviously, there are some you have to worry about, no doubt, but don't let yourself get bogged down by things that you're used to on the IT side, instead of focusing on what the field teams need, and therefore will really require as part of a good platform. Kind of a long-winded answer. I hope it made sense for you, Paul. I have another question here from Linda, and it says, you mentioned faster reporting, but you didn't describe it much. Are you doing the reporting yourself, or do I need to input Fulcrum data into a BI tool? Good question. You're right. I didn't get into reporting much in this conversation, even though reporting is a big deal in environmental situations. So let's talk about it. I talked about the data, right? I talked about Fulcrum as being the focal point for the data, needing that field platform in order to make sure your data is all complete, accurate, managed by a field managed process, etc. Reporting all comes from that data. So by the time you capture it in Fulcrum, you should be able to generate a report. And we do have that capability. Anything that we create, any app that you build in Fulcrum or workflow that you create in Fulcrum, you have the ability to automatically generate a formatted PDF report that contains all of that data. And there are some changes you can do within that to, very simply, without writing any code, that will, let you pick which fields are going to go on there. They're going to let you change the look of it in various ways, et cetera, et cetera. So there's stuff that you can do to customize that without writing any code. For those people who also want the instantaneous result, but want to have it in a fully custom way, we do provide a reporting engine. It is more code-based, right? You start off with a complete template and something that will run and give you everything you need, but then you can go in and you can tweak things dramatically. I saw one really cool report from a water company that we worked with, where on the front page of the report, they put a circle that represented a manhole, and that circle, that manhole had a pipe coming in and showed where the pipe would go out. How many stems there were coming out and what direction they went in, north, south, east, west, northeast, whatever. And that was something that they had built specifically and coded into that kind of report. So there's a bunch of cool stuff you can do in that report. It's not limited to single records. You can do a lot of stuff in there. We have a really great, by the way, consulting capability to support those kinds of instantaneous reports. We've saved people. We have one customer who went from 30% of their processing time on a project being reporting to cutting that to zero. Like just phenomenal results. Having said all that, we know that the field data is richer when it's in the context of all the other stuff that's out there. And we expect you to pump the data from Fulcrum that you get into ArcGIS or potentially other GIS tools, but of course, ArcGIS is the dominant one. ArcGIS, you want to get that data over via a feature service layer into ArcGIS and be able to incorporate that into a map, you can do that. You want to be able to push it into Power BI or Tableau or Pyramid Analytics or any of those kinds of tools that will give you, or platforms that will give you the capability to integrate the data into a specific report or dashboard, we can do that as well. Very often we're just pushing it into a data lake or a specific data mart that's being used for people who have field data plus, right? Maybe there's some external data coming in as spreadsheets or FTP feeds or something like that. That data is coming in, and so that gets merged with Fulcrum data. There are a variety of different ways that you can get that data into those other systems. It can be real time, record at a time. Every time I do every time I capture a new record or update a record, it shoots a webhook out to some other system, and that other system grabs it and puts it into a database. It can be real time. You have to know what you're doing there a little bit, but it's not hard. It can be exported, so you can choose based on your criteria a set of records that get downloaded via CSV or XML or geodatabase or whatever kind of format you want, and that can be transferred somewhere and then uploaded from those systems. Or you could use Fulcrum's API to say, okay, well, I have a specific piece of data that I need in a report that I'm creating or a dashboard that I'm making, and I want to get right now the status of, how many records I have within Fulcrum that are status complete versus status awaiting start. And you can call to Fulcrum, and Fulcrum can respond back with the data that's necessary to complete that report. So, yeah, I mentioned faster reporting. That faster reporting can be done in a variety of different ways, depending on what your business requirements are for latency, formatting. Are you integrating the data, or do you just want the data itself in a format like in a PDF report? And not just reporting, by the way, we've done integrations with things like PowerPoint too. So you want to get an update for a presentation you're doing daily, you can have an automatically generated report that shows everything in Fulcrum from that moment, and have that as part of your morning meeting or something. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. The bottom line is, it's the getting the data into the database, into Fulcrum, into the system of record for the field, which is Fulcrum, that matters the most, and that's what we are exceptional at. I think that's all the questions that I have. Let me just look one more second here. That is all I have currently listed in the questions. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so that seems pretty good anyway. We had a very long Q&A session, so I thank you all for your questions. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me directly, or you can submit a question to us on the website, fulcrumapp.com. Please feel free to help to continue this conversation in any way that you would like, any way that would be useful for you. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you again on the next webinar.